Hello there, folks. How you doing? Okay, I'm back again today to talk a little bit about Scottish independence again. Mainly, well, there's two things. There's gonna be a second half of this video that's gonna be based on responding to some things that I saw in an earlier comment. But the first part of this, I wanted to kind of go through kind of my feelings really about the general feelings about the situation, even though I haven't decided anything yet in terms of Scottish independence of how I feel like or whether it's you know whether it should or shouldn't happen. Let's put it that way. And but generally speaking, here's some of my general feelings. Do I feel that the Scots have a reason to feel um, you know slighted by Westminster or kind of ignored? I believe there's sufficient cause to believe that. Uh, I believe there's more than sufficient cause to believe that. Now, does that reason alone make me say, yes, Scots need independence? No. That reason alone doesn't do it. I also think the idea of Scottish independence as an idea is would only be it would only make the reputation that the Scots enjoy around the world, it would only make it more punctuated, or more, it would only give it more, oomph. You know what I mean? It would because the Scottish obviously enjoy a reputation of being a very proud people, maybe even stubborn, but proud people, and who like want to be able to do what they like and do what they see fit, and that sort of thing. And they're so they enjoy that kind of a reputation. And I think Scottish independence is something that would obviously enhance that reputation. Is that a reason for Scottish independence? No, not at all. You maybe could call it a factor, but I would call it, that one I just said is probably the weakest factor of all factors. Just to get that out of the way. I just like to say it because honestly, yes, the reputation that the Scots enjoy around the world, I feel, would only be enhanced by Scottish independence. But putting that aside, like I said, that is the least important reason. Do I feel that the Scottish Parliament is actually doing a capable job, and the SNP is actually running things well? Yes, I do. I obviously I have issues with all politicians, because I know being a politician, there's certain things that go along with being a politician. So yeah, it's not possible for me to completely trust any politician, but when I look at what the SNP and the Scottish Parliament are doing, and how they are essentially, from what I can tell, are putting the Scottish people first. And that's because, like the things like, for the fact that Scots don't have to pay for their prescriptions. When they go to the doctor and the doctor prescribes them medication, they don't have to pay for it, because the Scottish government wants everybody to get the medication they need and go home and take it, so that everybody's well. They want a healthy country. They don't want people trying to decide whether or not they can live with something and not get the medication to treat it. That's pretty good. That's putting the people first. I gotta say, that's an example of putting the people first. Add to that, which is going to be what this video is going to lead into when I talk about my fourth reason here. Adding to that, the SNP and the Scottish Parliament are, creating a lot of renewable energy. They're actually kind of devoting, Scotland to getting Scotland more and more renewable energy, which is brilliant. Because obviously, if Scotland meets its own energy needs, that pretty much makes it easier for them to become independent if they see fit. If the Scots see fit. So there's that. So, do I believe the SNP is doing a capable job? Yes. In the Scottish Parliament? Yes, I do. So, is that a reason alone for Scottish independence? No, not alone. It's not. My final concern, and for a long time this was and still is really my biggest concern, because what I'm going to show you today is obviously going to be something that is causing me to, be less concerned about this issue, but I'm still concerned about this issue. But what we're going to be looking at here today is my concern for Scotland going independent is, can Scotland support Scotland? When it comes down to it, that's really been my biggest and main concern. Is I want what the Scots want, but I also want it to be good for them. And I know that the Scots right now are split on the topic of independence. Really split. Literally down the freaking middle. It's uncanny. But like literally half the population's one way, half voted the other. With a slight advantage going to no to independence. It's just a slight little extra number of people voted for no. So Scotland remained in the United Kingdom. United Kingdom. So when you realize that the people are split down the middle like that, it's interesting. But as I said, my concern was if Scotland considers independence and is to go that way, can Scotland support Scotland? And I'll tell you, after seeing this article, I'm going to show you a little bit from here, and I will post the article down below, obviously, of course. But in this article, you're going to see where they did a calculation of the natural resources and the income generated from the natural resources in Scotland, and it's very, very interesting. And so, I'll go ahead and show you right now. But this means that Scotland is doing pretty well to be able to meet their needs. It's interesting. When we come back from this, I'm going to finish up with some of my thoughts on this matter. But what I'm going to say is I feel Scotland's well on its way to independence if it sees fit to do so. I think I mean, I'm still a little bit concerned about whether or not they'll be able to support themselves. And this article goes some way to convince me that Scotland's not in a bad position. I'll put it that way. Not in a bad position, really. And so it's alleviated some of my concerns. But I am still concerned about Scotland's ability to be able to support itself if it were to become independent. So that's where I'm at, obviously. And I obviously care about the will of the Scottish people themselves. And that's why I was just bringing up the fact that they are at this point in time split 50-50, pretty much down the middle, with a slight advantage going to no independence. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and show you this article that's going to kind of show you what the tally came up to on the natural resources generated by Scotland that creates, actual, revenue. And how much and what percentage it is of the United Kingdom as a whole, and that sort of stuff. So here we go. The research by the Office of National Statistics examined the value or profit provided by natural resources, such as wind, water, oil, and gas, and how they are used. In 2015, the partial asset value of Scottish natural capital was estimated to be at £273 billion, 34% of the UK as a whole. That's a third of the UK. The Scottish Natural Capital Accounts report explains the benefits we receive from nature are predominantly hidden, partial, or missing from the nation's balance sheet. However, by recognizing nature as a form of capital and developing accounts of natural capital's contribution to the economy and our well-being, decision makers can better include the environment in future policy making. The study found that renewable energy is the fastest growing natural resource consumed in Scotland, while oil and gas production has more than halved in less than 2 decades. Electricity generated from renewable sources was 5 times higher in 2017 than at the turn of the millennium, and now accounts for more than half of all of the country's energy production. Wind is the largest producer of electricity from renewable sources, overtaking hydropower as the main source of renewable energy in 2010. It accounted for 67.8% of the electricity generated from renewables up until 2017. Meanwhile, oil and gas production has steadily declined since 1998, falling 58.3% in less than 2 decades. In 2017, combined oil and gas production in Scotland was 73.7 million tons of oil equivalent, down from 176.6 million tons. The fish caught in Scottish waters has also reached record numbers. In 2016, the amount of fish captured was more than 2/3 higher than in 2003, a 70% increase from 628.2 thousand tons to 1,065.2 thousand tons. The largest annual increase in fish capture occurred in the more recent years, with an annual expansion of nearly 35% in 2014 and an increase of 14% in 2016. Scottish Environment Secretary Rosanna Cunningham welcomed the publication of the first ever Scottish Natural Capital Accounts. Ms. Cunningham said, "This is the first time we have produced a detailed set of accounts which puts a monetary value on the significant benefits we get from nature. While this work cannot capture all the benefits of our environment, it is a huge step forward in recognizing and emphasizing the importance of our natural capital." Okay, so that was very interesting to me when I read that and went, oh, wow, hey, Scotland is already on its way to creating, renewable energy, and it's meeting a great deal of its energy needs right now. And so that's interesting. I mean, that's the infrastructure they're creating. And remember, folks, they're creating 34%. Right? Or their natural resources are 34% of the entire UK, right? Well, think about how many times you guys know I have 2 dear friends from Scotland. Sharon Sunshine, who is very much pro-independence, and my good friend Mr. Capaldi, who is very much not so crazy about independence. And I love them both. I mean, they're both the best of friends to me. But there's a bit of a question as to how things should proceed. And even though I think it's good to see that Scotland is actually, well on its way, the diminishing oil is a concern. But I mean, it's already diminished quite a bit. So they're now relying on renewable energy and that sort of stuff, and that, unlike oil, the sun doesn't just stop shining, the wind doesn't just stop blowing usually. So, especially in a place like Scotland where, there's, I would imagine, a lot of wind and that sort of thing. But when you think about it, my friend Paul would always tell me about how Scotland is so small. The population of Scotland is like somewhat minute compared to the population of the UK. And so and he would go on to talk about these things with me and everything. But the fact is that if Scotland is that small and tiny little place and everything, but its natural resources are creating 34% of the natural resources created in the UK, well, that's interesting and impressive. Now, having said that, that makes me feel good about Scotland's future. Here's the part where the yes voters may hate me a little bit, but the fact of the matter is I don't think Scotland's ready. From what I can tell, looking around at this moment in time, that Scotland is still very much split down the middle. I think there's a couple reasons. But one would be many Scots could very much turn on the fact that Boris Johnson may do some things in Westminster, and the Conservatives and the Tories may do some things in Westminster that will convince some Scots to become yes voters. But I think bigger than that, I believe that there's a bubble of people in Scotland, okay, that maybe they're not opposed maybe to independence, but they're concerned. They don't want to cut off their nose to spite their face. They're pragmatic. They want to look before they leap, and I can't say I blame them. I mean, I cannot fault that desire. And so I feel there's this bubble of people there that could go yes, but I don't feel they're ready to go yes right now. And I think that bubble of people, what they're waiting for, what they want to see, is how well the SNP is going to run affairs in Scotland, and how well the Scottish Parliament is going to continue to run affairs in Scotland before they, as I said, take the leap. So in order, and unfortunately, because I know the SNP wants to push forward and the Scottish Parliament wants to push forward right now with a referendum, I personally think that would not be a good idea. I personally think that the Scottish Parliament needs to continue to take care of business and to continue to win the support of the Scottish people. I think they're doing a damn good job of it. The last election is a prime example of that. Right? Okay. So, that's some of my feelings on that. I mean, obviously, as I said before, I feel like Westminster treats Scotland with some contempt. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't so, but unfortunately, that's the way it looks. I mean, that's the way it comes off. I mean, they kept Scotland out of the negotiations for Brexit. I mean, it's just completely disingenuous with what they were saying when they came down there in 2000 and the independence vote was in 2016, was it? But when they came down there, when the vote was going to happen, and you had, a bunch of English MPs and, a bunch of MPs from Westminster and stuff, and there was this big old campaign to let's stay together, we're stronger together, vote no, and all that. And they came up and they were schmoozing everybody and telling everybody how the Scotland doesn't have to worry, that they're going to be included in the government, and let's move forward together and everything and all that. And then what happens within just a couple years? Brexit. Okay? The Scottish people, if you take Scotland and the way Scotland voted on Brexit, were very decided against Brexit. They did not want to leave the EU. Okay? However, in the bigger scope of things in the UK, they were outnumbered. Okay? So now there is this really, really big fundamental change that's going to happen with the UK government. Okay? Is Scotland allowed in on the negotiations for this huge, big change? No. So, do the Scots have a case for holding an Indy referendum, even though it's soon? I think they do. I think they have a case. Do I think they should wait for a more of a groundswell of support from the people of Scotland? Wait for that to manifest? I do. I think they should wait. I don't think they should rush into it. And all the time that they're being patient, they can be doing their job in Scottish Parliament and continuing to win the respect of the people. And that's only going to help them. And so, I mean, if their renewable energy continues to grow at the rate it's been growing, they're going to be able to meet their energy needs in a big way on their own pretty soon. And like I said, because they're moving into renewable energy sources, they're not going to be completely reliant and dependent on the oil. You know? And the other interesting thing is about that fishing, how the fishing's been booming. I mean, where they said in 2014 there was a 34% increase in the number of fish, and then in 2016 there was a 14% increase. I mean, you're talking about large percentage increases of fish when it's already been going up, and you're getting huge percentage jumps like that. So that means there's a lot of good fishing in Scottish waters. You know what I mean? I think if I do manage to get over there this year, I'm going to have to drag Capaldi out on a deep sea boat. Maybe I'll drag Sharon's other half and their friend along with us. But, you know, I would like to go out and see what's out there in the Scottish waters, especially knowing that it's so bountiful after reading this article. So, anyway, ultimately, when it comes down to it, I would not rush into the Scottish independence issue. I think the S&P will be better served to continue to mind their camp the way they have been, and putting the Scottish people first and that sort of thing. I do have a great amount of sympathy for the Scottish people, because they are basically stuck dealing with whatever Westminster says in certain ways, and that's why there's been certain laws, certain things that have really upset the equilibrium, like the bedroom tax. You know, anybody that has like an extra bedroom in their house and they don't have kids or anything like that has to pay extra taxes. Can you imagine here in America if the government tried to do that? I mean, it would. But it happened there, and so they're having to deal with that. But the Scottish Parliament is doing what they can to try to mitigate that, to try to help people, you know, and make it less of a hardship for people to have to pay that and everything. It's just, I don't like seeing how if it looks like that internally these two parts of the United Kingdom are basically having to compensate and for the other one. It's like, obviously the relationship's not working out. That's obviously why independence is getting talked about again, because obviously the will of the will of the Scots is separating. You know, they want to be a more progressive nation moving forward. They want to concentrate on things like renewable energy and green energy and that sort of thing. And so they're moving in a certain direction, and the UK is, you know, not really as eager to move down that path as they are, I guess you might say. Honestly, I mean, watching what I see in Westminster, I mean, the only reason I think the UK even cares about Scotland is, well, the natural resources, the contribution to the economy because of that, right? I mean, 34%, and Scotland's just a small little area, right? So, I mean, sometimes I think that must be the only reason Westminster is so keen to hold on to Scotland, and why they continue to say things that are fairly disingenuous. You know, I had a commenter, and I gotta say, this comment was like a very classy comment, which is something that I really admire. I really, you know, like to see when people, you know, can say what they have to say with class without having to resort to name calling or anything like that. Okay, so this person commented, and it was very interesting. They were basically saying, you know, you said you were intrigued, so I thought I would add some devil's advocate points for you to consider. I was like, okay, I'm good with that. I mean, I don't mind hearing the opposite point of view. So, Boris' mandate with 45% is nothing like the SNP's. Actually, Boris's mandate is 43.5%, and the SNP's mandate is 45%, actually. But yeah, they're close enough that they're both they should both be a mandate. But we'll go on here. The SNP made the general election about independence, and 99.9% of people who vote Indy in Scotland vote SNP. So 55% voted against SNP and their stance on independence, whereas with Boris and essentially Brexit, there is no telling what percentage of the other 55% support Brexit. They are simply not comparable figures in this case. I disagree. If you get 45% of the people to agree about something, if you get 43.5% of the people to agree about something, you have a significant amount of the population that feels something needs to happen. And that percentage is actually getting pretty darn close to 50%. You know what I mean? You have a very large percentage of the population that is decided on something. So for me, that is significant. So I get what you're saying, that it depends what the opposition to the SNP and what the opposition to maybe the Boris and the Conservatives, but yeah, but really not that much. Because if you think about it, you know, it's like I said, Scotland is very much kind of down the middle. Okay, it's like I said, there's a bubble. There's a bubble of people that vote SNP, but they're not ready to vote. They're not ready to vote for independence yet. At least it's the way it seems for me, an outsider looking in, judging from the interactions I've had with, you know, some of the Scots that I've met in my, you know, YouTube, you know, journey, and it just seems to me that there's like I said, there's a very much split down the middle at the moment, but I feel there's a bubble of people that are potentially willing to vote for independence, but they want to be sure that they've got the right gears in place. They want to make sure they got the right structures in place. They want to make sure Parliament's solid. They want to make sure of these things. I can't fault them for that. There's no way I could fault them for that. That's why those people are sitting in that bubble. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe there's not a bubble. I think there is. I truly do. I just think there's a lot of people in Scotland like me that are just very reasonable and very cautious, that they just want to make sure that they look before they leap. And that's not a bad thing. So that's basically what I would say there. But like I said, this person's comment, obviously with a lot of class, well laid out, their points. I can understand their points. I don't wholly disagree with what they say. But like I said, very classy comment, and that's kind of why I decided to go through it. So let's see. In these clips, could it be argued that the vote was actually wider? Maybe it was 62 to 38 or whatever. Yeah, with the election officials rigging it the opposite direction. Fair point. That is a fair point. An absolutely fair point. So let me read the rest of it here. The table with the no votes has been explained. I've heard that before. I haven't had it explained to me yet, but I have heard that it's been explained. So I will hopefully be seeing that at some point. There were still packed. They were still packed up prior to the count. Yes, Dundee confirmed this on Twitter. Okay, well, I'll have to look into that. But as I said in this video, I was pointing out what was going on there with the election, and I wasn't saying there's corruption here so much as I was saying seeing these things bothered me, whether it's getting affected either way, whichever way. I don't want it to get. I want democracy to be democracy, and I don't want anybody monkeying with the vote either way. So this person's point is valid, and that's what I'm totally giving that to them here because it's a valid point. I called for everybody to come out and make their election officials honest. Okay, that's what I said. keep your election officials honest, not keep your election officials voting yes for Scottish independence. That's not what I said. And I also didn't say keep your election officials voting no for Scottish independence. I just said I made my plea to the Scottish people that if another referendum does come around, get out there, use your smartphones and the technology that's available to you to be keeping your election officials honest and making sure it's not getting rigged either way. So that's how I feel about that, and yes, it's a very valid point. Let's see. Can you advise who made the claims against Nicola Sturgeon? That's from a video that I watched with her. Like it was, I think, it was from December 7th. I'll tell you what. I'll get the link for the video where those links came from, or those clips came from, and you'll be able to see it in that video. One of the, I think it was the Liberal Democratic MP, got up and said something along those lines, and so she got up to answer it. So I'll leave a link to that down below. Finally, on the budget, if Scotland had won independence in 2014, the budget prepared by SNP would be sitting with a £35 billion black hole right now due to the oil crash. Well, the oil was crashing before 2014, though. But fair enough. They may not have accounted fully for that. I could easily see that as being certainly a possibility. How could such a small nation cope with that without help from Westminster? The timing of the budget would be the last things on anyone's minds. Plus, just an FYI, the SNP refused to vote on potential Brexit issues was key to the need for a general election, even although they had supported one of the options on the table. If there was no general election, the budget would have went ahead as normal. That may all be true, but obviously the SNP isn't inclined to work with Boris and the Tories because they were left out of negotiations to begin with. I mean, that was part of this whole problem to begin with. So they were going to be in opposition, and that's what they've decided to be. And I do admire your ability to look at the aspects of it and identify it and stuff. I just want to let you know this to this commenter, and I haven't shared the name, but to this commenter, I mean, I really enjoyed your comment, and I look forward to comments from you in the future. I'll put it that way. But I think, honestly, ultimately, I don't know if the black hole would have been that big, but I will say that my biggest concern in this video, if you remember, for this whole video for me, was my point number 4, can Scotland pay for Scotland? It's my biggest concern regarding Scottish independence, is that ultimately I don't want the Scots to be effed. And it's why I preach caution. Because I want what's best for the Scots. I do. I really do. And if that means the Scots taking their own future into their own hands, as you hear the members of the SNP saying it, if that's what it takes, if that's what it ends up being, then I support that. But if the Scottish people don't decide that, I support the will of the Scottish people. You know, I think it's a real kind of storm going on there. You know, obviously I get it. You know, Boris has his mandate, and I don't deny it. But I also don't deny that the SNP has a bit of a mandate. I just think that it would serve the SNP to just sit back, serve their countrymen well, as they've been doing. And I believe that, number one, I believe that some of the things that may happen in the next year or 2 or 3 in Westminster may start to convince more of the Scots on the ground, normal, everyday Scots, right? If there may be some of that, and then, like I said, if the the people continue to see their parliament carrying forward with class and taking care of the needs of its people and that sort of thing, that's gonna help. And so I don't know. Ultimately, I wish for Scotland, for the best for Scotland, so that they end up with the best deal possible in the end, because they certainly didn't want out of the EU, and that's what the UK is now doing, and it creates a problem. And the UK just wants to be like, yeah, shut up, Scotland. So what? You're in the UK, so shut up. The UK decided, shut up. Well, I don't know how well that's going to ultimately go down with the Scots. In my opinion, it's probably not. Ultimately, it's not going to be a viable plan to placate them. So, that's just some of my thoughts on it. I mean, I love England. I love Britain. I love all of it. Everything, all of that stuff. I mean, I'm fascinated with, the history of the, royalty and the kings and queens of Scotland and England and France and even popes. I'm just fascinated by the Renaissance history, that sort of stuff. I mean, I love it. And obviously, I have a huge interest in Britain, England, Scotland, Ireland, and all of it. And so I would love to see more harmony here. Honestly, I would love to see more harmony. But obviously, that's where the argument starts, and it may start down in the comment section of this video. People are going to be arguing who's the ones creating disharmony, or who's the ones preventing harmony, and then people will start arguing over that, and then the harmony will be gone, and then then they'll understand how it got that way. No, I'm just kidding. But it does come down to people in the end. It comes down to people assigning blame for who is disrupting the harmony, and then everybody starts getting into a finger pointing game to the point where nobody's maintaining the harmony, and it's just a train wreck, right? That's what I feel like it is kind of in the UK at the moment, because it's just, you got nations with differing ideals. Just, ultimately, I just see Scotland is moving in a different direction. And it's like I said also, is you got to look at what happened over in Northern Ireland, where in this recent election, a majority of nationalist MPs were voted in Northern Ireland. So people voting that way, and then when you see what happened in Scotland with, the SNP getting voted in the way they did, and it's just showing you, because those two countries weren't, even though Ireland wasn't as decided as Scotland, but the percentages were in favor of staying in the EU. So it's interesting that in this election, the two countries of the United Kingdom that voted against Brexit voted in a huge majority, in Ireland voted in a majority of nationalists. In Scotland voted in a huge majority of nationalist MPs. So these things have to be considered, because they are significant. Just as significant as Boris Johnson's 43.5% of the voters, basically voting for him and the Conservatives, and that's a mandate, right? That's the way it works, folks. The people vote, and that's the will of the people. They're making their voice known. That's how it happens. So there you go. Anyways, that's about it for this one, folks. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you.